And joining us now, founder and president of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Cliff May, former NSC chief of staff for the Trump administration, and a former CIA analyst, Fred Fleiss. Good morning to you both, gentlemen. And Cliff, we haven't seen you forever. My goodness. Good to see you. Good to see you both.
Good to see you again.
So, Fred, we'll start with you. Your reaction to the arms deal as the U.S. is in the middle of trying to broker a deal. Is this all part of that deal?
Well, first, it's great to be on with my friend Cliff May, who's really given principled analysis about the war in Ukraine. We're at a tipping point right now. President Trump did his best to give Putin an opportunity to end this war. Putin has decided to make the wrong decision. He's used his free will, to frankly pursue evil. There have to be consequences. We can see that right now. Trump is going to send over $800 million in missiles to Ukraine through NATO. He has decided to implement 50% sanctions on India, and this has to be followed up by very tough oil sanctions and energy and economic sanctions. This is not simply a challenge to world peace. It is a challenge to the authority, the President of the United States, and I think Trump's going to act.
Yeah, good points, Fred.
Yep.
Difficult situation. At this point, we hope things would be moving along. It doesn't look like it's happening, at least not moving along fast enough. Cliff, in our last discussion last hour, we discussed how Ukrainian President Zelenskyy expects the security guarantees framework to be ready next week, including the kind of guarantees he expects, hoping to avoid a repeat of the 1994 Budapest Memorandum, where Ukraine gave up their nukes for assurances just to be invaded by Russia in 2014. How do you think Zelenskyy is going to play this? Obviously, the past, without real strong guarantees, it didn't work out well for them. What do you think the situation is now, and what are the prospects?
Security guarantees are going to be that are real are going to be hard to come by. As you say, the Budapest Memorandum was not worth the paper it was written on. Russia agreed that it would respect the territorial integrity of Ukraine, and obviously that's not the case. There were also Minsk agreements. That was not the case. Now, part of the good news is that the French and the British have been saying we could see putting in troops as peacekeepers there. But what we're hearing from Sergei Lavrov, the longtime foreign minister to Putin, is no, you're not going to do that. Or if you do, there'll be Russian troops and maybe Chinese troops along with it. At the end of the day, I'm all for security guarantees if you can arrange it, but basically a strong Ukraine with lots of weapons, what they call an iron porcupine, hard to digest by predators. That's the most important security guarantee that Ukraine can have, and that can be done. I'd like to see a frozen conflict. I'd like to see a truce. We know that Putin is not very interested and won't do that unless he gets significant pressure from the president, which I'd like to see. The First Lady, Melania, she's understood Putin very well, having come from a communist country. He talks nice, but he doesn't want peace. He wants victory. He wants conquest.
Yeah, unfortunately. That's what the record shows. Fred, similar question to you. President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, will be meeting today with senior members of the Ukrainian government right here in New York. What could be the possible goals of this meeting?
I think they're regrouping. As I said, Putin was given an opportunity in Alaska. He blew it. I think there will be a discussion about security guarantees. I agree with Cliff. I don't see this happening. We really need to arm Ukraine to the teeth. And if both sides want to stop fighting, some type of peacekeeping force to observe a ceasefire might be possible. I don't see Putin ever accepting European ground troops or combat troops. But there is a precedent for ending difficult conflicts when both sides want to end it with peacekeepers who will verify a ceasefire. But both parties have to want that. Putin clearly does not want that. So it's really not time to talk about peacekeepers yet. We have to put the pressure on Putin to make him respect Donald Trump's efforts to end this war.
Absolutely. Well, Cliff, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, she addressed reporters yesterday and spoke to about the recent damage to Russia's oil refineries by Ukrainian attacks. Let's listen and we'll get your reaction, Cliff.
Ukraine recently dealt a blow to Russia's oil refineries. They have taken out, as a matter of fact, 20% of Russia's oil refinery capacity over the course of their attacks throughout the month of August.
So, Cliff, 20% of Russia's oil capacity. What's your reaction?
Yeah, it's very interesting. They've done that also with their own weaponry, with homemade drones. They've been really innovative in terms of drones, and America is learning from that. By the way, America also learns when we send weapons and see how they're used. We also benefit when we send, for example, ATACMS, those are long-range missiles, and then we make for ourselves a new generation of ATACMS, essentially a better weapon for ourselves. So we make money, we learn how our weapons are used, we get better weapons for ourselves. The Russian economy is in very bad shape, much worse than most people realize. That is putting some pressure on Putin, even though he's not admitting that's the case. So if the pressure keeps up, again, the Ukrainians doing this without all the help they should have, deserve, and we should be giving them, they are putting pressure on Putin, whose troops have moved like, over 1%. They probably occupy 20% of Ukraine, but over the past 1,000 days, their advances have been maybe 1%, not very much at all. The Ukrainians are not giving up their sovereignty, their independence, their freedom, their culture. Putin is not pursuing peace or a path to peace, but he can be pushed back to the point where he says, okay, I'm suffering too much. I will agree to a truce, not to peace, but to an armistice. The kind of thing you've had since 1953 between North Korea and South Korea.
Yeah, clearly not enough pain on the Russian front, so to speak. It's as simple as that. Fred, now, in another developing issue here, U.S. fighter jets were scrambled to track and intercept a Russian spy plane off the coast of Alaska 4 times in less than a week. This was confirmed by NORAD. The Russian aircraft did not enter American or Canadian airspace. What do you think Moscow's trying to do? What do you think Putin's trying to do? Is he trying to flex some sort of muscle? And is there any significance of the fact that this happened in Alaska, where he just met with President Trump?
I think it's another sign of bad faith by Putin. It's another sign of Putin disrespecting President Trump. And I think it emphasizes why we really are at a turning point, that Trump has to engage in very tough actions against Russia, starting with energy sanctions, which will do a lot of damage to Russia, then economic sanctions to seize Russian assets worldwide, to break the Russian economy. Trump does not want to do that, but I just think inevitably we seem to be moving in this direction.
Well, Cliff, before we go, I'd like to get a quick word on the U.S. boosting our naval forces off the coast of Venezuela. We got about 20 seconds. It's reported this is to combat Latin American drug cartels. President Trump designated cartels as terrorist organizations. What do you expect to see from this, Cliff?
Well, I think it's very good that President Trump is putting pressure on Maduro, who's the dictator of Venezuela, who's closely tied in with Moscow and also with Tehran, and is also essentially a big-time drug dealer. He has ruined his country. Migrants or immigrants out of Venezuela are all over South America. Too many of them probably with criminal backgrounds in the U.S. It's good to see Trump getting tough on Maduro in Venezuela.
All right, gentlemen, we have to leave it there. Cliff May and Fred Fleiss, thank you so much for joining us this weekend. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, guys. Good to see you, Fred.